So Shalom Aleichem, welcome to Meaningful Interviews, Part 2 with Rabbi Yaakov Homnick. We're discussing Rabbi Hutner Zatzal, his relationship with Lubavitch and Lubavitch Rebbe, Rabbi Yaakov's own experiences. His father was a Talmud Muvhak of Rabbi Hutner. And today I'd like to talk a little bit about I believe you grew up part in the Crown Heights, East Flatbush, that area, and your association with Lubavitch, with Chabad. And from there, if you could also talk more about, Rabbi Hutner's kesher with the Rebbe or not kesher, so you decide how you want to approach this whole topic. Go ahead.
I just put in a different microphone. Is it better or worse?
I think it's better.
Okay, good. So it's a attachable microphone. I forgot to put it in the first time. So I grew up in East Flatbush, and we never walked to Crown Heights, but like I said, we would go Chalamoid. My father had this minute, he would take us always to daven one day Chalamoid in Lubavitch, and sometimes we would catch the Rebbe's minyan. That was a bonus. Now, what my father did do was, I always ended up going to very odd summer camps because my father he didn't have a lot of money, and he was always looking out for ways, at least that was part of his motivation a lot of times, was to get a good deal. But the fact is, I think that he also wanted us to get exposure to different currents of thought and human argument and behavior. So the fact is, I went to Early Torah Day Camp. Before I didn't go to sleepaway camp until I was 10 years old. And even then I went to Salem camp, but at Salem Chassid, to give you a flavor. So when I was at Salem camp, I was so scared of the Rebbe, he walked around with a stick all day, that I was like the best Talmud. I'd never been such a good Talmud of any Rebbe. But he used to walk around the Rebbe, and he used to say, "Der was halt nicht der Erzbelle kommen the Platz, but by kommen mit der Chaim." So I understood, and I mean, I don't know if he would have the guts to hit me anyway as a non-Hasidic guy in the camp, but I didn't want to take any chances. And at that time, by the way, my father didn't have a bed yet. He grew a bed for visiting days, so it was kind of short. And the Rebbe was so proud of me. We were learning the third parak of Kedushin. The Rebbe wanted to show off how well I'm doing, so he asked me to read the Mishnah for the class, but he wanted my father to hear. And the Eibishter, divine comedy, but the Eibishter made that the Mishnah he gave me to read was, Harayat Mekadeshesli B'zi. And my father was laughing into his beard. He was like stroking his beard because he was plotzing. But back to Lubavitch. But before I ever went to sleepaway camp, I went to Early Torah, and we had a Rebbe. I think I had the same Rebbe for 2 years. Who he had a club foot. So you maybe know who it is.
What was the name?
I don't remember his name. He had a club foot. He had one shoe that was especially built to be, because one foot was longer than the other.
I don't know. Rabbi Munitz, Rabbi Reitzis, Rabbi Chaim Reitblatt.
No, I don't think it's any of those. I mean, it's not ringing a bell. Anyway, it was
Rabbi Smith. Rabbi Smith.
No.
Okay.
It was a good. I'll be honest. If I'm remembering right, the first year he was my Rebbe, I didn't notice the shoe, and the second year I noticed it. I was a little bit old, but he would, it wasn't so obvious, and he didn't walk around too much. And during class, he sat at the desk. So anyway, I was in Early Torah, and so then another thing was that in Early Torah they would take us to Mincha in 770 once in a while, maybe every 2 weeks or something, and go to the Rebbe's minyan for Mincha. And then at the end we would all yell, they had us, the camp had us to yell that. Yeah, it was way before there was any Melech HaMashiach stuff going on.
Yeah, but I'm surprised. They said they did that in 1968 already?
Absolutely. Before 68, I already went to Salem. So they were doing it in 66 and 67.
Interesting. Okay.
Absolutely. And we enjoyed it and we were proud of it. Rebbe gave like a nod, and it was nice. It was a nice experience. And again, as the whole way that I was brought up was to respect all Rebbes, all Chatzeris, all Talmid Chacham, and not to try to figure out, my daddy's bigger than your daddy.
Right.
We didn't operate that way. So I went there. That was my first connection with Lubavitch, and it was very pleasant. I only have good. I don't have any trauma associated with that. It was a nice experience. I don't know if it was more or less than any other day camp, but it was a day camp. We learned, we did activities. Everybody was nice. It was a pleasant memory. One of my brothers later ended up in Gan Yisrael in the Catskills for the summer, because I remember we visited him, but I don't remember which brother it was. But I never did. By the time after Tzelman camp at 10 years old, then they started sending me to Camp Aguda. And so that's a different thing. Now, what am I answering again?
My question.
Just general shaykhus to Lubavitch?
Well, yeah. Did you later, when you were a bacher, when you were a teenager,
so here's the thing. So here's the thing that I did, and I'm honestly, I don't know if you'll find another Litvish Yeshiva bacher anywhere from my time that did this. It could be you will, but it's certainly mute to mute. But I used to, every Erev Shabbos, I used to learn the Rebbe's piece on the Rashi Altar. They published it in the Algemeine.
Yeah, the Asicha, yeah.
I don't know if it was called the Algemeine then or it was called the Morgan Journal. I don't remember what stage in history it was, but the Sicha, but on Rashi Altar. I wasn't so interested in general, but on Rashi Altar, and it was there like every week. So, and I would learn it. I learned it carefully. A lot of times I'd look up the
Marmakomis.
Yeah. Now the thing is, you have to understand that where I was coming from is I was well aware that there's some Fakafta Hasidim would think that everything the Rebbe says is gold. I was also well aware that there's some, anti Rebbe people who think that whatever he says is, is the opposite. And so I was very conscious of that. It always annoyed me when Lubavitchers would call people misnagdim. I said, nobody's misnagdim anymore. That people are either Hasidim or not Hasidim. They're not always misnagdim. And that was always an annoyance to me, but they always try to divide the world with Hasidim and misnagdim. But the point was, so I was, and my mahalach always was that I want to be Kabbalas Emes and Misha Omra. I want to learn Torah, and I have some kind of built-in clock, built-in standard of what I think is solid and what I is less than solid. So I trust my instincts at a certain age. And so I would learn the piece every week, and I had a lot of regard for it. There was some weeks where I hope he's right. Some weeks where, all right, it's it's like the word, makes like a word. But and I tell you a trick that I did one time. I don't know if I need a kapara for this or not. But my Rebbe, Rabbi Shechter, big Talmud of Rabbi Hutner, it was not his child. He handed him his yeshiva, pretty much, not exactly, but pretty much. And and he was when I was 17 years old, I was in his shia, and then when I was 18 years old, I started to go to him for Shal Shudas every Shabbos. And so one week I said to him, there's a kasha here in the Rashi, and the Mizrahi is laying like this, and Damascus is always saying like this, but you could ask a kasha on that one like this and that one like that. So maybe the Malach is like this. I basically told him over the Rebbe's whole piece without telling him who it was, and he was full of his smiles and he liked it a lot. Then I told him who it was. I was like, all right. He didn't say anything negative, but he was he didn't expect that. So I a little bit did it as a wise guy because again, I was a real Kabbalas Emes Mishamra guy from the earliest years, and my father, in many ways, was Mechanech me that way. So I never wanted that. Like, okay, if the Rebbe said it's possible, That's ridiculous. If the Rebbe said it, it's always termed Sinai. Also ridiculous. It has to be judged on its merits like everything else. And a lot of this is good, and we should be open to learning it. So Mamela, if somebody wants to come now and say that the reason why I wrote all my Seforim on Rashi is because that was influenced by the Rebbe's Torah Rashi, someone can make that theory. Who knows? But the fact is, I'm just showing you that I was, and Mamish, I learned it every week. And by the way, that's why later on I was very pained when the Mashiach thing started accelerating. And all of a sudden there's more and more Mashiach every week. Of course, I should really explain also, I used to only read that Rashi thing, which was a limited version of the Sichos. But later years, once I wasn't looking for the paper every week, I would get the Sichos that they'd bring them to shul.
Right.
And I lived in Eretz Yisrael, and I used to daven and the Shadiger Beismanish on Shabbos. And so it was a Hasidic place. So for sure, it was always, every week I went through the Rebbe's thing. And like I said, I had weeks where I thought it was amazing, I had weeks where I thought it was all right. I had weeks where I was bothered by things. One of the things that always annoyed me, you may not enjoy hearing this, but what always annoyed me was when, he would ask good kasha, and then all of a sudden he'd ask this kasha where he says, since it says in the Mishnah that Ben Esther Chumash and something like this.
Yeah.
Yeah, so then this Rashi is too complicated for that kid to understand. So that became a form of a kasha. Every Rashi had to be understood by a 10-year-old kid. And I never bought that premise at all. And I thought that was an odd premise. And as the years went by, I think there's so many Rashis that disproved that as a premise, including many Rashis who doesn't even tell you what his work is. He tells you. In Vayikra, he says this pasuk is well explained in the Teres Kahanim, and he doesn't tell you what the Teres Kahanim says. So he's not telling that to the Ben Esther or Chumash, So so I don't need to go through a whole debate about it. But the point is, that was something that I felt was it gave me a flavor of somebody who didn't learn. Rabbi Yaakov Homnick used to say that the Gedolim who didn't learn is Labotka, like Rabbi Feinstein, they're a little bit not given, they didn't have to fight it out with people that were their equals all the way up the line. And so I would get a little bit of that flavor on the Rebbe. I was like, come on, if you had a real tough Harusa all the years, they wouldn't let you keep asking this question. We're like, come on, put those questions aside. But I'm just saying, I'm telling you, as someone who really enjoyed it, respected it. And in many cases, I decided, like, I was my career, like, yes, this is the terrorist. The Mizrahi is wrong, the Moscow Doe is wrong. The Rebbe is right. If I thought he was right, I have no problem saying he was right.
So was there any point in your life that you were exposed from Rabbi Hutner's machshava and his Rebbe-like behavior, that was obvious, and you knew about Lubavitch? Did you ever have a desire to be a chassid?
No. Now, my family in the Ukraine, my father's family were Rachbas Trivka Chassidim, which of course is from the Chernobyl region, that whole line, and we were very proud of that, and including the fact that in our family tradition, we were taught that my great grandfather, my father's father's father, had experienced a moifus from the Rachbas Trivka Rebbe. To me, the bigger moifus, before we get into that, the bigger moifus was that the Rachbas Trivka Rebbe told him to go to the United States in 1906. Yeah, not too many people were doing that. Yeah. And the Rebbe told, gave him some kind of havtacha. I shouldn't say that. That's more on my mother's side. We had a havtacha, but the Rebbe at least gave him an eitzah. And they claimed it was a moifus with the Rebbe. I'll tell you very quickly what the moifus was, because my great grandfather killed a guy. He had a mice like Moshe Rabbeinu. The guy was beating up a yid, and he couldn't be sober. And he was a very strong guy. He clobbered the guy, and then suddenly the guy looked dead to him. I don't know, he wasn't a doctor. The guy might have just been deeply unconscious, but
Right.
he thought the guy was dead. And he ran to the Rebbe, the guy, you gotta let me in right away. It's an emergency. And he said, I got this dead guy over here in the alley. What do I do? So the Rebbe sent somebody with him and said, there's always shikra going over here. Everyone's used to it. So you pick up the guy and walk him out of town like he's shikra. The two of you walk him out of town. And then once you're ready out of the range of people, then you drop him in the woods somewhere. So, and that's what he did. And then the Rebbe said, but now you have to take you, because there was a company, the Singer sewing machine company was offering him to bring him to America to sell, because he was selling well in Europe. They thought he'll sell well on the east side. So he had the standing offer, which he wasn't taking. But the Rebbe said, now's the time to take the offer, leave the country. And that was, so that's part of our whole family,
Right. Okay. But I'm talking about, becoming an active chassid. You never had that desire.
No. And I'm telling you, forget it. In a way, it was cultivated more the other idea of, to appreciate Kabbalah Samus and Misha Amra, appreciate all the 12 Shvatim. Don't make the mistake that they did with Yosef. Always be open to see an Adam Gadol. But I'll also tell you another funny thing about me. I don't know, maybe it's more of my style. I'm meeting on this people I'm talking about. But I always, any time that a speaker was too charismatic, I would stop going to him. I used to go to Rabbi Yosef, like my father would take us to Rabbi Yosef Ber Soloveitchik's Haggadah Shir or Yartzeit Shir. But I saw he's too hypnotic, because by the end of it, you're convinced he's absolutely right. Just from his ability to control the crowd and to deliver his delivery. And after a while, I said, I'm not going anymore. My father was upset with me. Where's the Ahavas HaTorah, And I said, I can't go to somebody who's got magic. I'm afraid once it's magic, I don't want to be, I don't know if he's taking me to the right place. So I don't want to follow magic. I want to follow logic. That was, and Rav Shapiro in Eretz Yisrael, who was the most murdic of Maggid Shir. I mean, I didn't hear lumdus from him. I heard, the Zagat, it was tremendous volume of material. He was in his later years, he didn't even have a job. He was just running, giving shurim 40, 50 a week. And each chabur is telling different Torah. It was unbelievable. But after a few times, I stopped going, because I said, I'm too hypnotized. I don't want to be hypnotized.
Right.
And his Hebrew is so beautiful. Every word, I didn't even hate the Torah. He went out the Torah. I just loved listening to the Hebrew.
Right.
But I said, not good. And so I had an aversion to those people who are so charismatic that you might follow them, even not based on content, just based on the atmosphere. And I said, you know what? When Mashiach really is beguiling himself, then he can sweep me off my feet all he wants. But until that time, I have to be more critical.
Okay, so Rabbi Hutner and the Rebbe, what you mentioned last time, that the egocentricity issue, but did you ever discuss Lubavitch and the Rebbe with Rabbi Hutner?
No, I never did. Not even in a small way.
Did your father?
Yeah, my father did. So my father, there was a certain kufa where my father was so close to Rav Hutner. We was talking to him hours a day. And Rav Shurkin had a machlek. If you know, Rav Shurkin had a machlek with Rav Hutner. He was a Talmid of the Chavetz Chaim. He had been a Chaim before. He felt Rav Hutner wasn't treating him right. Never was. But Rav Shurkin.
You're saying your father
Yeah.
would speak for hours with Rabbi Hutner, and then you mentioned Rav Shurkin.
Yeah, that's right. So I'm a chavrusa with a grandson of Rav Shurkin. So I know from his side what his family thought. And he said that at one point when they were angry at Rav Hutner, they were berating him, they said, Elan Karnish, is this the guy that talks Shmuz B'Tamnik? So so it's a tragic comic kind of a thing, but to me it sent me a strong message. It's really true. And I always got from my father the feeling that Mama used to sit and spend hours with him, and he would talk with him about his views of everything. So my father used to say over all the time what Rabbi Hutner told him about the Lubavitcher Rebbe, which he said, and this is what he told him. He's a baki b'shas and a tamim ba'avoda, and tzakvittel kommt es nicht. Yeah, so that he's a baki b'shas and a tamim ba'avoda, but he doesn't hold that he's right to be a Rebbe. But to me, that never won me over as an argument, because if someone's a baki b'shas and a tamim ba'avoda, and today's generation, I think he's got to be way ahead of pretty much, any other candidates to be the Rebbe. I mean, who are you going to put? You have someone who's a bucket b'shas and talking about the mythic kvittel. You have a candidate like that. You know what I mean? So and I heard it, and I thought like that's like a thing for Gedolim among themselves to say. I didn't think that's a thing I have to be guided by.
Right, I understand. Now, did your father, did the close Talmidim, and other Talmidim, did they look at Rabbi Hutner as a Heiligir? A Heiligir, you know what a Heiligir means?
Yeah.
In other words, you're getting married. By us in Lubavitch, the Rebbe gives a bracha. You don't give a bracha. You're not announcing that marriage.
Right.
Kipshutai. So, was there a sense of heiligkeit, of kedusha, beyond the machshava and beyond the Gemara? Was he perceived as l'mshichmai u'l'mayla in tahara and kedusha?
Yeah, honestly, I can't answer it fully. I'll give you some flavor. I will tell you that there was a rule that you couldn't announce your shidduch until he met the Kala. For a long time, and then he stopped that rule, and he stopped, and then eventually, so they stopped the rule, and people announced, and then brought the Kala. Then eventually, he stopped meeting the Kalas altogether. People asked Rabbi Shechter, his Talmud, why did Yeshiva change his policy on that? And he said that he says, listen, he's becoming more of an alter yid, and he's being more machmir with himself. So Rebbe thought that was al kedusha, that he's stopping to see the Kalas. So all of these things, Rebbe didn't explain himself too much. You had to do an analysis where it's coming from. But that was definitely a thing that you could not announce the thing till there was a Kalas. I'll tell you a story off of that. Which is a fascinating story. It's not exactly responsive. But when I was a kid, we used to dive in a certain shul. My grandfather was the rabbi for a while, or the president, and a Hasidic yeshiva. And one Shabbos I came, and there was a man collared my father. He was a wealthy man in the diamond business, a Hungarian Jew. He collared my father after diving, and he screamed me at my father. What kind of, that's the way a Rebbe is, that's a Rebbe, that's no Rebbe, and he's beretting Rabbi Hutner, and my father's taking it. My father's trying to a little bit be down, say something, but he mostly shut up and let the guy talk, right? Like the Mishnah Novice, Alter Shtadl. And so I always wondered, what was that about? What was going on in that thing? So finally, some years later, when I was old enough, at that time I was maybe 11. But some years later, when I was old enough, I asked my father, what was going on there? And I remember the name of the man, but I didn't. So he explained to me what happened. He said that this man, he was yelling there when they broke up his daughter's shidduch. That I heard from the original conversation. So he explained to me that what happened was that the man's daughter got engaged, and then some Hagar who had been in the concentration camps called them up and told them, don't you know that the mother was a Zaina to the SS guys in the camps? There were some women that were providing services of that variety to the SS guys. And so when they told them that, and maybe they were Holocaust survivors themselves, they weren't going to be down with Chas on that. So the parents came to Rabbi Hutner and said, we have to break the shidduch, we're not interested. making a shidduch with a lady with this history. So Hutner said to them, listen, I don't want to be beside these people. By making this the thing, it'll come out and damage the other children and damage this girl. And anyway, let me break the shidduch for you, and that's it. And so Hutner called the guy in and he gave him a whole cross-examination, this and that about the girl. And he said, I decided this girl's not for you. You got to break the shidduch. And the guy, yeah, I'm analyzing. I see the personality types, no good. So this man was screaming at my father with so much pain, angry at Rav Hutner for breaking the shidduch. What kind of high-handed behavior is this for Rashi? He thinks that Malabos to break a shidduch. But meantime, the emes was that he saved this man's whole family by breaking the shidduch himself, because later that man's son made a moedic shidduch. The daughter also married her, yeah, nice guy, whatever it was. But the point is that by Rav Hutner taking the heat, he was able to really be master with his family. So there were certain things he was willing to do that were very selfless and very, So does that make him exactly a tzaddik or kodesh? I don't know, but so and those things weren't that widely known by the Talmid. I happen to know it because I know it through my father. I'll tell you one other ma'aser that the man to this day doesn't know. He's still alive, and my father knew it, which was that there was a man who went out to be a Rebbe, and their first school decided that they want to fire him. For whatever the reason was, they're not happy. They're gonna fire him. A lot of these schools were stopped. They were quick to fire, quick trigger finger, had a quick trigger finger. So Hutner said to them, "You don't fire him. Let me take it." First, he argued with them. He tried to talk him out, but then he said, "All right, you're committed to this. Let me fire him instead of you firing." So Hutner took in this fellow. He make a meeting with him. He says, "Listen, I have to tell you, I'm very impressed with what you were able to do this year being a Rebbe. And I'm the main reason why I encourage you to become a Rebbe is I want you to have the confidence that you can be a Rebbe. And now that that's established, I need you back in the code." And he said, "What, Rebbe? It's going great. I'm loving it." He says, "You're loving it? Good. You'll do it in a couple of years. Meantime, you'll become a bigger Talmid Chacham. You'll learn the code for a couple of years. You go back out, and you'll be even better." And so he took the heat of, firing the guy. That's not so bad because he didn't fire him. He brought him into the code. And he did it to save him from the trauma of being fired from his first job. And later, let's say 2 years later, the guy went out, became a Rebbe, and he was a Rebbe for 40 years. There was a well-known, successful Rebbe.
Right. So let's talk a little bit about his family, his wife, his daughter, if you're open to that, and if you know a little bit about it. What can I mean about Rebbe Bruria, her writing and her BJJ, the seminary is covered that Torah and has produced Bnei Yisrael and leaders but his wife, I think she was a freedman, right? I forget her maiden name was Friedman.
I thought it might have been Alta, but I could be wrong.
Alter?
It could be. She was from a Gerech Hasidic family.
Yeah.
And now, there's something I saw in the footnotes of your book that you were not aware of, so I want to make you aware of, which is that she was an American girl and she had a degree from Hunter College. And
a degree in what? A degree in what?
I don't know. It's something, it just to have a degree,
Okay.
And because she wasn't going to work, but she had a degree. And her father was a Gerech Hasid. No, maybe Lipschitz his name. I'm not positive.
Yeah, Lipschitz.
Yeah, Lipschitz.
That's it.
Right. So he was a Gerech Hasid, and he had one son and one daughter, and he wanted the daughter to make a shidduch, and so he went to Poland, to Warsaw specifically to look for shidduch for his daughter, and someone read this shidduch, and he was a millionaire back in the 1930s, and so he wanted the shidduch, and Rav Hutner said to her that he wants to live in Eretz Yisrael. And she said, listen, I grew up in America. I'd rather live in America. So he said, I'll make you a deal. I mean, they negotiated, and this is where they arrived at, that she'll come with him for a year to Eretz Yisrael. And if at the end of the year she's still uncomfortable, then he'll go with her for a year to America. And if at the end of the year he's still uncomfortable, then they'll have to figure it out whether they're going to go back to try Eretz Yisrael again, Poland again. They'll have to figure it out, but they're going to do 1 year here and 1 year there. So the year in Eretz Yisrael, with all these mices, with the learning, with the guys, he slapped the guy, you know, who something like this.
Yeah.
I think I heard that it was Rabbi Paley, who was later a Rosh Yeshiva, is the one that he slapped. But you know, but it was all friendly and like old time, you know, Muslim where nobody resented it.
Right.
So he clearly had a great year, or maybe he extended to about 1.5 years, I think, if you look at the dates. But then she brought him to America, but it was also with the same condition that he has to find, you know, a place. And he started in America with this Yud Gimel Midas year. No, not Yud Gimel Midas, Yud Gimel Animamas. I started this year on Danny Mamas, and I got a bunch of kids from Brownsville over there that went, and from those original guys, a lot of them they're still in Chaim to this day. The families Hunger, Laska, Mr. Laska became the principal of Chaim, the Husha principal, and Mr. Laska's son was Rabbi Hutner's Neshama. She was only nifta recently. So and other sons work in the yeshiva for some form or another. So those were two of the names I remember that were in that original group. And so he had a little hassle with them. Then he got the job in RJJ, and Rabbi Lynchner told me, my son is married to Rabbi Lynchner's granddaughter. So Rabbi Lynchner told me he was an old man already. Rabbi Lynchner said, you know, I'm the one who got Rabbi Hutner started. I said, really? He says, yeah, because I was impressed with him in Brownsville, and I told my Shver, Mendelovich. And I showed my Shver to him, and he said, this is one of the guys, because Mendelovich was like playing chess, like in the ways like Lubavitch Rebbe was doing. He was playing chess with like, let's fill up America with the right Rebbeim and the right principles. He was a very unselfish figure. So Rabbi Mendelovich got Rav Hutner a job in RJJ, and but this is very important for you to know also. It relates to some of the footnotes.
Yeah.
So after a year in RJJ, or maybe 2, where he was being successful as the principal, and my grandmother was on the Women's Auxiliary Board. My father said to me, Rav Hutner only mentioned my mother once, where my father says, I did something, and he says, you remind me of your mother. But that was it. So he worked with her, and you know, she was the ladies' auxiliary. But the point was, he was doing well in RJJ if for a year or two enough, that he gave them an ultimatum, and he said, either you open a high school or I'm out of here. So they said, all right. The board got together and they made a meeting. They said, no, we're not ready to open a high school. So maybe he stayed like another year while he was, but they knew already he wants a high school. So Rabbi Mendelovich, I think, may also been involved, but they heard about it in Chaim Berlin, that he might be available because he wants to make a high school, and they didn't have a high school either. Their board voted to make a high school and make him the principal. So he was the principal of the high school and the elementary when he started. But the point was, they made a high school to get him as their principal.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that information. But during the Torah and the Yom Tovim, did you feel when you were in his house?
Oh, I didn't answer about the Rebbetzin. I apologize.
Right, that's what I wanted to hear.
No, I apologize. I just explained to you about Hunter College in the back.
Okay.
And another very important Maisa was that my father got this from, there was a man named, I think his name is Isaacson, who was very active in Chaim Berlin, Balabatim, in the lay people positions. And my father asked him, how did you get involved with Chaim Berlin? What's your shaykhs? You don't have kids that went to Chaim Berlin or anything like that. So he says, because I was Rav Hutner's personal accountant. I did his taxes, I did. He says, and when his shver was nifta, he left $2 million, 1960. He left $2 million, a fortune. And and according to the will, it was going to go half to his son and half to the daughter, and the son never got married.
Right.
So in many ways, the daughter is the one who had some future going. And Rabbi Hutner told the accountant, do whatever paperwork you have to do, but I'm not interested in Yerusha Sabbas. So he refused. So he turned down the $1 million. She says, so they were all shocked. The lawyers, nobody ever heard of such a thing. He turned down his chelik. Now he had gotten a lot of money from the shver. The shver, the daughter had apartment buildings that her father had given her, like Naden type of money. He took away. See, Chazal, he could take Naden, but he wasn't going to take Yerusha. It's Yerusha Sabbas. So in Mela, and the accountant told my father that the IRS was convinced there's some kind of scam going on. And they were auditing him like crazy for years afterwards to see where's he going to slip himself the $1 million back. So not only did he had Yisurim on top of it because he did that, but again, this is not a thing he advertised. Nobody knew that. My father was a curious guy, and he pushed the accountant to tell him confidential inside stuff. So he was capable of, and we see in these other stories, he's capable of taking a big hit without anybody knowing about it. It wasn't for the fanfare. It was to do the right thing.
Right.
So back to so that with the Rebbe, and I want to say this is very important. The Rebbe was a very nice lady. She was Tisha Kabbat Sicha Nitzel and Asher. You didn't see any Kabbat Sicha from her. She was the quietest person. I think she's the quietest woman I ever met. She was just quiet. She didn't talk. When she opened her mouth, she's always intelligent. And she liked to give candies to the kids in the Yeshiva. Like if you pass through there as a snusher, she'd slip you a candy. Very super nice lady, quiet, unassertive. Except that she was running these buildings. And one time I remember when my friends were coming home they lived on the block with us, across the street. So a group of tenants was complaining to her about the rent, and she didn't want to bring them in the house with the Rosh Yeshiva. So she's standing on the porch with these like 3 guys all angry at her. And she's standing there, and again, she was like stoic because she hardly talked at all. She was stoic, and she let them blast them. We were just watching. It was fascinating. So she was this type of person. Now later, she was nifted very shortly after the hijacking. I don't know how many people realize this. Maybe a month later, something like that. So what happened was like this, that in the hijacking, she got out in the first group. She was home earlier. We're sitting there and we're watching her on the porch. She's home.
Right.
We were all intimidated by us. I don't know how many people went to greet her. Maybe some of the Nash, but she was home. But then she got pneumonia and she died very shortly after. And a lot of people tined. Who knows? It's something you can never know. But because she did a mysterious nefesh in the desert. By day it's very hot, and by night it's very cold. And she gave Rav Hutner, her husband, she gave her sweater because he didn't have a sweater. They didn't think they're going through a cold climate, and he didn't have a sweater. And she gave him her sweater all through the ordeal. He was wearing her sweater. It wasn't, a Malba Shavisha. It was a general enough sweater that he could wear it. And people felt that in a way she gave her life because maybe she was more sensitive to the cold than he was. Maybe she needed to sweat. Anyway, that was, who knows? I'm just, for the sake of history, that was a thing that happened. And that was the thing that happened. Now, also with her, I want to say this, that I said that my mother has shown. My mother died when I was 10 years old. I don't have a lot of memories from her. But there was one year where Chaim was in the middle of moving back from Far Rockaway to Coney Island Avenue, and they weren't set up in either place to make Simplest Torah. According to what I saw in your book, that they got in trouble for Simplest Torah.
Yeah, somebody told me that.
Yeah, so could this be part of the reason why they couldn't do it in Far Rockaway? So they did it in Yeshiva Eastern Parkway. It was not far from 770.
Right.
And I was there for 2 years in elementary school. So we all walked. That's the one time we all walked to Eastern Parkway and nothing. And so my mother Shalom came home and said, I cannot believe what a tzaddik is the Rebbetzin is. I never saw anything like that in my life. What she says there was some, chatty girl who was totally self-centered, not aware of her surroundings, was talking to some other girl across the Ezra's Noshim, and she had her elbow on the Rebbe's shoulder. She probably didn't realize it. She thought it's a bookcase, so I don't know. But her elbow was on the Rebbe's shoulder. She's leaning with her elbow on the Rebbe's shoulder and talking to this girl. And it's going on for several minutes. The Rebbe didn't make a peep. So just to understand the type of tzaddik we're talking about.
Right. Yasher Koyach, thank you. We will continue with our next part, Emir Hashem. And this was a wonderful second interview. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.